Good evening. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We are very excited to be hosting this online webinar with Keith Snell for Piano Town. My name is Carly Cummings, and I work on the sales team here at the Neil A. Kjos Music Company. I'm here to welcome you guys, and then I'll be running the Q&A session at the end of the event. Speaking of the Q&A, I'm going to encourage you all to put your questions into the Q&A function of Zoom as opposed to the chat. It's at the bottom of the screen in a very similar location. It's just a little easier to make sure that we address every one of your questions. If you do pop it in the chat, I'll find it, don't worry. We hope that you have all requested your free packets for this event. For those of you who have emailed us but have not received your packet, I promise it is in the mail and on its way to you now. And for anyone who has not yet requested a packet but would like one, feel free to email us at email@kjos.com with your preferred shipping address, and we'll get that out as soon as possible. I'm going to go ahead and put our email into the chat for you right now. We also do have a teacher's guide for the primer book that we are going over today on our website, and I'm also including a link to that for you. So if you don't have a packet, you can follow along online. All right. And then as well, Kjos is offering a special discount on the Piano Town products if you have attended this seminar. The promo code for that will be posted in the chat at the end of the presentation, and you can go to our website and use that code directly on a cart order to receive 40% off the Piano Town books. Piano Town is a perfect place for your young students to learn to play the piano from the very beginning, and I'm very excited to introduce Keith Snell to speak with you today.
Thank you so much, Carly. I really appreciate it. I hope I'm not, I just keep looking like I'm blurry over here. I don't know what's going on. My camera's not adjusting. Anyway, good morning, afternoon, whatever for everybody. It's actually where I am. It's 6 o'clock in the evening. I'm coming to you from my teaching studio in Bath, England, which is where I live. So I'm giving it my dinner time for this. No, it's okay. I love, if I'm going to give up my dinner time for something, this is a good thing to give it up for, because I love talking about teaching beginners. I love teaching beginners. I always have. I think I kind of like making my own mess. Do you know what I mean? Instead of cleaning up somebody else's, you know, when you get a transfer and it just feels like that. But I've always been fascinated by it. Even when I started teaching when I was 15, my mom got me teaching. She was a teacher also. And so she kind of supervised and got me students when I was still a teenager. But I've just always loved the process. I've used a lot of different methods in my time, sort of, you know, figuring out what things I like and what things I work well and other things that I don't. So we're going to look at the Piano Town primer today, and you're basically going to find out what my priorities are in teaching and the conclusions that I've come to and how I like to do things. You know, there's no one absolute perfect way, but this is going to be at least as close as I can get to showing you what I like to do. So the first thing I'm going to look at actually with the Piano Town book, the lessons primer, I want you to look at the back page. I think Carly's going to pop that up on the screen just in case you don't have a book. But I basically just want to show you everything that's in the course. Okay, so it's 5 levels: primer, level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. And at each level, there are 6 books, actually. There's 4 core books. There's the lesson book, of course, and it is supported with a theory book, a technique book, and a performance book. But then you've also got supplementary Christmas and Halloween books, and also a variety of solo sheet music is available as well. So that's an overview of all the things that are in the course. Now, if we could look at the, I want to show you the front cover of the book. I'm not sure if Carly has that or not, but on the very front cover, we have this artwork here that is showing Piano Town. The idea behind the title was that we wanted to give students a sense of location. You know, just like they come to your house for piano lessons, we wanted piano lessons to have a whole place of being. So we wanted to create this idea of a town, a place to go where they're learning about piano. And everything that's shown in that picture on the cover, they will go to that place as they go through the book. It's not really a story that goes through the book. but there are connections. You'll see, it'll make sense as we go through the book. But the next thing I want to show you is on the inside of the front cover. Just so if you open the cover and just look right on the inside of the front cover, there's a preface here. But what I want to draw your attention to, about halfway down the page, are some bulleted points. And these are things that set Pianotown apart from other methods that you may have used. And so I kind of want to go through these bulleted points a little bit, just so you have an idea of what to look for and some things that might be different than other methods. So the very first bulleted point there is about the questions at the beginning of each piece. And we worked really, really hard on these questions because these can be so valuable. And every single piece you'll see as we go through this book, every piece starts with a few questions for students to answer. And the purpose of the questions is actually multiple. So the first thing is that by having the student answer the question first, before they start to play the piece, you want to do the questions. It will encourage them to get in the habit of looking all the way through a piece of music before they play a note. Okay, such an important foundational skill. Look through the music before you start to play and see what's going on. Okay, so that's a habit we're developing with the questions. But the questions are also there for you as a teaching aid, because they will do two things for you as the teacher. The first thing is that the questions will help you introduce whatever is new, whatever new concept is being presented in that piece is going to be addressed in the questions. Okay, so that helps you present what's new. They are also there to help review concepts previously learned. Okay, so they will help you introduce new things as well as review previously learned concepts. Okay, now the second bulleted point is about callouts, what we call callouts. This is the way that we introduce new concepts throughout Pianotown. And if you've got the book, I would like for you to just, so I can show you an example of one. If you would turn to page 11. On page 11, there's a piece called Town Hall. And on this page, we learn about the dotted half note for the first time. Now, usually in a method, when something new like dotted half note is introduced, there's usually a box or some section of the page up top that shows this new thing, says what it is and what to do with it, and defines it, whatnot, or shows how to count it. So our experience was that you could show that to a student, and then you go into the music and you get to the new thing, and you end up having to explain it or teach it again. We also find that most students with information at the top of the page, they kind of just ignore it, right? So we decided to just let that fall off the page, get rid of the information and put the information actually where it's needed, right in the piece of music. So you'll see that by the very first dotted half note that they see, there's a call out line going to the name of what it is, and then underneath that, how to count it. So the information is placed in a spot that's relevant for the student rather than somewhere separate on the page. And this is how we introduce concepts throughout Pianotown, by putting that information in a relevant location, okay, that students will see it. All right, so the next bulleted point is about the use of classical literature in Pianotown. So before Pianotown, when I was using other methods, I found very often that I would get maybe into about a level 2 of most methods, and I'd get a little antsy to get out of the method and into real music, And if you're familiar at all with my piano repertoire series or essential piano repertoire, you know that there's that preparatory level and level 1 with the very, very easiest literature. One of my goals as a piano teacher is to prepare my students to play music by the master composers. So I like to get that going as early as possible. So the goal in Pianotown was to get that kind of music into the method as soon as possible. See, I like using methods because I like being organized, and I like making sure that things go in a logical, systematic order. and that I don't skip anything, that I dot all my I's and cross all my T's and make sure to present everything and that it follows in a sequential way. So I like that about methods, and I want to stay through the method. But when you get it to levels 3 and 4, only playing method composed pieces can get a little boring, I think, both for the teacher and the student. So in levels 3 and 4 of Piano Town, we mostly have literature. Okay, so it becomes a really literature-based method in those upper levels. There's some literature in levels 1 and 2, but 3 and 4 that's where the focus really is. So that transition happens into literature before they've left the method, and I find that a lot more motivating to stick with a method that way. The very last bulleted point I want to mention as well is about the art and lyrics. And you'll see as we go through this with the art, it's extremely detailed art, which draws students' attention into it. And the lyrics are very verb rich. They're very active lyrics about doing things and experiencing things. We really wanted to avoid things like we'll have fun in the sun, something that's very generic like that. We wanted things that were a lot more engaging. And the purpose of that is to stir imagination. If we accept that music is a form of self-expression, that has to come in part through stirring imagination. And when all you're playing is a C major 5-finger position, that can feel difficult to do. So we need help from the art and lyrics to get the idea into a child's head that music is a way to express something that's happening. And I'll show some very concrete examples of that as we get into the music. Okay, all right. Now I want to go on now to page 3. On page 3, we have a Welcome to Piano Town page. And I love this page because I really think that first piano lesson I just love first piano lessons, getting to know the kid and getting started with piano. And it's something that can be cherished for a lifetime. I still have my first books. My very first book when I was 4 years old was called Timothy's Tunes. And after that, it was a preschool kind of a book. And then I went into the first book of the Lila Fletcher, the primer level of the Lila Fletcher course, and I just think, so often students cherish those first books. So this is a place where they can put their name and how old they are when they started and what the date is, what grade they were in, and have that as a keepsake. But it also helps you because you can find out how well they can write at this point. Can they write their name? That sort of a thing. This book is really designed for ages 6 and up. This is not a preschool book, so they need to have some writing skills. But of course that varies, not all 6-year-olds are the same, or 7-year-olds are not all the same with how much they can write. So you can find out how much they can write. There's also a line, my piano teacher's name is. I don't know if you've had this experience. I have, where they get very shy and they're not quite sure what to call you, right? So this way you can really decide what, they're going to call you, or they're going to call me Mr. Snell, or they're going to call me Keith, or whatever, we decide that and we write that. We write that there. So I think that's just a really fun way to start. Now, pages 4 and 5, these are just sort of, things you do at a first lesson. And, if you've taught a million first lessons in your life, you know how you like to present the keyboard geography and finger numbers and how to sit at the piano and all of that. But this basically, gives you a script by which to do it. Sometimes you're just tired at the end of the day. You want that script there. But I think it's also helpful for parents. If they're not real familiar with piano, they can look at that, and that could be helpful at first lesson. Now, when we get to page 6, this is the first time they're actually going to make sounds at the keyboard. And this is all about finding the groups of 2 and 3 black keys. And at the bottom of the page, there's a little footnote that says the keys can be played together or one at a time. I actually do it both ways. So we'll go through and we'll find the groups of 2 black keys with fingers 2 and 3, and we just play them at the same time. so we're locating them all over the keyboard, right? But then I like to go back and have them play the fingers one at a time and say them out loud, 2, 3, and move it up, 2, 3, and so on, because then they're learning more about their finger numbers. But you can also see how coordinated they are. Can they play legato right now, or is that going to have to come later? I also like coming back to this page. You can make little exercises out of it, but I really like coming back to it when they learn the names of the white keys. You'll see when we get later on, we learn the names of the white keys by relating them to the black key group. So, we've learned 2 black keys, and then we learn that C and D are just below 2 black keys. So you can come back and do these exercises on white keys as well. Okay, page 7, we present quarter note and half note and explain that the way each note looks shows how long or short it will sound. So we just start with those 2, and we offer 2 suggestions for how to count. You can say 1, 1, 1, 2, or you can count with the note names quarter, quarter, half, note. That is actually my preferred way to do it. And I have actually 3 reasons that I like to do it that way. First of all, they have to go a little slower. If we count 1, 1, 1, 2, those are single syllable words, and the tempo gets going a little faster. And I think most kids start playing a little too fast. That's when more mistakes happen. So anything I can do to slow them down a little bit. So if we say quarter, quarter, half, note, and make a big deal about that half note, right? Then that's going to slow them down a little bit and keep the pace a little bit better. The second thing that I like about it is that they're actually naming the kinds of notes they're looking at. I've had transfer students too often who've come in after maybe 3 or 4 years of lessons, and they can't tell me the name of a dotted half note, it just hasn't stuck. So by counting this way, I know that they're constantly naming the note values, because I always think, if one of my students transfers to a different teacher for some reason and they can't name their notes, I'm going to be so embarrassed, right? So this way, I'm sure that they know the names of the different note values. Now, the final reason I really like counting this way is it makes teaching eighth notes so easy. Because with saying quarter, 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 you're already subdividing the sound of that quarter note. So changing that into 2/8, 2/8, 2/8, 2/8 is so simple. And I never have any trouble teaching eighth notes because they've already been set up with that sound of the subdivision of the quarter note. Okay. All right. Now I want to go on to page 8 with our very first piece of music called New Things. I like trying new things. Let's see what today brings. So those are the lyrics, the very first lyrics they're going to have. And again, I remember the very first lyrics I had in my very first book in Timothy's Tunes. It was a middle C piece, and the words were right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. So not the most imaginative lyrics. I mean, I guess it got the job done, but I think, we really wanted lyrics that were a bit more interesting, a bit more active. So we have the artwork on there with this girl who's waking up in the morning, and there's all sorts of things to notice in this picture. The clock says it's 7 in the morning. We can see the sun coming out. Looking out her window, we see a barn. That barn is going to reappear later on. She's thinking about things she's going to do during the day, having some pizza, riding a horse, playing the piano. And on the wall, there's a little blue ribbon, and it's for first place. And if you look very, very closely, and believe me, your students will, it says best lamb. So all of that detail is going to draw their attention to the music and keep them engaged. Okay. Now, up in the corner, I mentioned to you that we didn't devote big blocks of space to show whatever was new in a piece, that we did it more with call outs and with the questions. But for you, we call these the teacher tabs up here because that's going to tell you what is important or what is new on that page. The next thing I want you to look at right underneath the picture, and I'm showing you this page in a lot of detail because it's the basic way that all the pages are set up in the book. So we do have a little paragraph about legato here. So if we do need to say something like that, that's where that will go. Now, you know, if a student doesn't have legato right away, that's okay. It will come in time. But we do start working on it right there, just the idea. And it's another reason to go really slowly, that you don't let one key up until the next one plays. And you might have to go super slowly to get that. Okay. Then underneath there are the questions. So the questions are always right there at the beginning of the piece. Now, something else I want you to notice is our placement of the duet part. Okay. Usually duets are put at the bottom of the page, right? Well, since this book, it's a horizontal book designed for a young person, 6, 7, maybe 8 years of age. And they tend to be shorter people, right? And when you put a book up on the music rack, right? When you're a short person, your eye line goes right to that lower part of the page, okay? So that's where we wanted their music. And we wanted to get the duet out of their direct eye line, okay? So we put the duet up at the top, but you'll notice we put the student part above the duet so that you can follow along while you're playing with them with the student part. Okay, so we're starting here on 2 black keys. There's a keyboard map right under the title. We start with the strongest fingers, fingers 2 and 3. Then when we go on to page 9 to up the street, now we're on 3 black keys using the middle fingers. So we do start with the center of the hand, fingers 2, 3, and 4. We do not use 1 and 5 on black keys at all in the beginning of this book. You know, they're shorter than the other fingers, and it's very hard to get them in a good hand position up onto the black keys right now. Plus, they're just more awkward. 5 is a little weaker, thumb moves in a different way. So we start in the center of the hand with the longer fingers where things can be a little more stable. So we're on the 3 black keys. Now, in the art, we see that same girl. She's going off to school now. She's got her backpack on. She's meeting a friend up the street. Her mother's waving goodbye. And we see a little lamb just peering out from behind the house there. Remember, she got that prize for best lamb. So these things will keep sort of occurring. Now, the most important thing about this page, I think, is that we introduce the idea of looking at the direction that notes move, right? Whether they go up or down. All right. So the whole point to me about well, there's a lot of points about pre-staff, but one of the most important things about the pre-staff reading is that basic concept of looking at the notes and seeing what direction they move. Okay. We were super picky with the engravers to make sure that all of the distances were measured exactly. Okay. So all of the angles of up and down really are accurate. Okay. So that students can get used to following the direction of notes. All right. Okay. Page 10. Mary had a little lamb. Okay, so there's that lamb we keep talking about. And in the artwork, she's out by that barn now. She's got her lamb. And you'll notice in the barn, there's a chicken up here now. Okay, and that's going to appear and disappear as we go through. All right, so in Mary Had a Little Lamb, we learned 2 things. And one is whole note for the first time. That's at the very end of the piece. Whole note, hold it. But the other thing is we learn the other way that notes move. They repeat. Okay, so we've learned up, down, and repeat. And that is the most fundamental thing about reading music. And we want to take advantage in the pre-staff music of looking at that so that when we get onto the staff, we're already used to looking for direction, up, down, and repeat. Okay, town hall on page 11, which we briefly looked at already. Now we're going to combine the groups. Well, we did this in Mary Had a Little Lamb. We combine the groups of 2 and 3 black keys, okay, and get experience that way. Now, I should mention, of course, they would be using the technique book and the performance book along with this. So they're going to have supplementary material to play as well that will reinforce the same concepts and techniques that they're learning here. The thing they're going to do for the first time here, well, two things. One is they're going to skip a finger. Okay, they're going to skip from 4 down to 2. So that will be different, having to skip a finger. But the other thing at the end, playing the cluster of notes all together. And of course, that's to imitate the sound of the bell, right? So I have to tell you an embarrassing story about this, right? Because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 bells at the end of the piece. So the book was first in print. I'm teaching it to a student. And I said, oh, we've got, it's 4 bells at the end. And my student looked up and she said, but the clock says it's 8 o'clock. I thought I was going to just sink into the floor. I couldn't believe we missed that in proofreading. But anyway, if your student happens to notice that it says it's 8 o'clock, they can play this 8 times. Sometimes what I've done is I've taught them about repeat sign right then and there. I just draw in the repeat signs and I say, look, we're going to play that twice. Play 8 of them instead of 4 of them since it's 8 o'clock. Okay, so there we go. All right, now pages 12 and 13 is where we learn about the white key names. Now we do this in a different way. Most methods seem to teach A as the first white key. And I always feel that that's just a little mean. I think that's hard for students to find. So I think it's a lot easier to teach them the white key names, relating them to the black key groups. And this is a basic concept that runs throughout Pianotown, where we teach something new by relating it to something they already know. Okay, so they know where the two black keys are. And we can teach that C is just below the group of 2 black keys, and then we can find all the C's. And that D is right in between the 2 black keys. So we look for the 2 black keys, we go D is in the middle, and we find all the D's. And then E is above the 2 black keys, and we find all the E's, and so on. Then we do the same thing with the group of 3 black keys. And that F is just below the group of 3 black keys. B is just above the group of 3 black keys. Then we do G, which is above F. And then finally, the last one we do is A. Okay. And so I just find that is a much, much easier way to teach the white key names. Okay. Page 14, the artist. So this is our very first piece on the white keys. Okay. And it's going to be the very first time that we use the thumb, that we use finger 1. Okay, as I said, we on the black keys we just use the center of the hand. So what we're going to do here, since it's the first time we're using the thumb, we're only going to use it in conjunction with fingers 2 and 3, those fingers that are a little more stable, that we're used to using already. Okay, and we're starting in middle C position, which is always my preferred place to start. I know that may sound really old-fashioned, but I think it's the easiest place for kids to remember where to put their hands when they're starting. Okay. And I even, when we go on to the staff, we start there as well, because I think it's easier for them to learn to read there as well, to get started reading there. But anyway, so we're in middle C position. And what you'll notice about all of these melodies in middle C position is that the hands mirror each other. We don't move in parallel motion between the hands, we mirror. So if we play 1, 2, 3 in the right hand, we're going to play 1, 2, 3 in the left hand. Okay. Now in purple paint on page 15, we add the 4th finger in each hand. Okay. We're gradually adding fingers in. And then finally on page 16, kites for sail, we add the 5th finger for the very first time. Okay, so we've really built up some coordination in the longer, stronger fingers. Now we can add 5. But what you'll notice is that we only use the 5th finger 1 time. Okay, and we prepare it, right? Just before they play 5, they're on a half note with their 4th finger. You can really make sure that that 5th finger is nicely curved. As soon as they play 5, they move away from it and back to the center of the hand where things are more stable. Okay, I just always get nervous when they right away have to play repeated notes with the 5th finger. I think it's very hard to do. So we start gently with how we use the 5th finger and gradually build stability there before we ask more of it. So then we go on to getting hungry on the next page. So in Kites for Sale, they bought kites. They decide they're getting hungry. They start heading towards the pizza parlor in the artwork. And we learned about the difference here between a step and a skip on white keys. Okay, so all we've done so far are steps. We're going to learn about skips here. But what you'll notice is that when they skip, we slow the rhythm down to half notes so that they have more time to process this new thing of skipping letter names and finger numbers. Okay, now when we go on to page 18, we're actually inside the pizza parlor, which is fun. And you can look out the window of the pizza parlor and see some things there as well. All right, so now we are going to move the left hand down and play in the C major 5-finger position. Okay, so of course the big thing here is that they play the same notes in each hand, but with different fingers. So now we're moving in parallel motion instead of contrary or mirroring like we have been doing in the middle C position. So we start by learning the steps in the C 5-finger position, and then on 19 with the drawbridge, skips in the C major 5-finger position. So this brings me to something else I want to point out in Piano Town, is that we constantly pair pages together where students can compare and contrast concepts, right? So we present the C major 5-finger position here, and on one page we have steps, and on the other page we have skips. So they can really see and feel and hear the difference between these two things. Okay. Now, with some students, you may just present this one week and this the next week. But I think with the majority of students, you're going to teach these two pages together, and they really complement. And we do this kind of thing all the way through the book, where we have paired pages like this. And on page 19 in the drawbridge, in the questions, one of my favorite way that we do questions, and you'll notice a lot of the questions are not having to really write a lot. It's sort of more about circling things or finding things. But circle the fingers you will use, when they circle 1, 3, and 5, and 5, 3, and 1, and they see that they don't use 2 and 4, and they really get that feeling of the skips in their hand. Okay, on page 20. So we're going to introduce time signatures now for the first time. I find usually students have no problem understanding what the upper number of the time signature means. It's that bottom number that can kind of throw them. They forget what does that bottom number stand for. So what we do here, instead of putting the 4 on the bottom right away, we put a quarter note, okay? Just to help reinforce. We're going to change that to 4 a little later on. But this way, hopefully they can make that association that it's 2 quarters in each bar, or anything that equals that, okay? So we introduced the bar lines and measures. What you're going to notice, though, is we've dropped out the finger numbers so that we are not confusing. If you start counting now with numbers, I'm going to do both. I will count with numbers, but I'm still going to do my quarter just to keep things slow, right? But if you're counting with numbers, you don't want them confusing finger numbers with the counting numbers. So we've dropped the finger numbers out. They're reading by note name. They're reading by direction that the notes are going, okay? And it's the same thing as we go on now to page 21 with Pirate at Sea, 3/4 time. And then on page 22, the dinosaur song, we have 4/4 time, okay? Now, the dinosaur song is really important. So this is the next to last pre-staff piece in the book. We have one more pre-staff piece, and then we go on to the staff. And what the dinosaur song does is it reviews all the ways they've learned that notes move. Steps going up. We've got skips down. We have skips actually with the 2 and 4. We have repeated notes, steps down, skips up, etc. Okay, so they see all the ways that notes move here. Okay, in the art, there's one boy who's leaving. He's waving goodbye, and he's carrying a violin case. All right, so when we go on to page 23, we see that he's playing in an orchestra. All right, and here we have, of course, the most famous melody of all, the tune from the Ode to Joy tune from the Beethoven Ninth Symphony, which my mother always said somehow all piano students were simply born already knowing it, because they always seem to know this tune. So what I want to mention is, if you have a student who knows this tune and they come in and play the dotted rhythm, that's absolutely fine. You know what I mean? Don't be punitive about it. You can, talk to them about it. You could draw it in what that looks like if you wanted to. But if they don't play the straight quarters that we have written in there, that's fine. I think the most important thing here is to help them just enjoy play the music. I mean, it's helping them read repeated notes and steps, of course, and it's got a really lovely chordal accompaniment that goes with it. But I wouldn't worry too much about that dotted rhythm. Okay, now we go on to page 24, and we're going to introduce the staff. So what I think is really important in helping kids learn to navigate the lines and spaces of a staff is giving them something to hold on to, some way that they can feel secure about learning the name of each line and space. So we start with the base staff. And we show that the base clef sign is there to name the F line, and that it's a specific F. It's the F below middle C, all right? So we're going to make landmarks out of the middle C and the F. So we're back in the middle C position. I think middle C is the most natural landmark. If a student can't name any other note on the staff, don't they always know middle C? So let's use that to our advantage, okay? And what you're going to notice is that we bold the F line, and on the little keyboard maps, we put a bass clef sign on the F note. Just everything we can do to reinforce that concept that line is naming that particular key on the piano. So the sunset only uses the F and C. And then on page 25, low tide, we fill that in with steps. And we learn about line notes and space notes, stepping consecutively down, and then repeated notes and stepping up. Page 26, we take the same approach, teaching about the treble staff, okay, that the treble clef names the G line. And so now we have middle C and treble G as landmarks. And in taking attendance, we just look at the G, the C, and the G, and then we fill in on page 27 with the steps that are in between the C and G. One of the most frequently asked questions that I get when I present this book is, why did we start with the bass staff? And the reason that I think that those two reasons. One is that I find that most students get more comfortable reading in the treble staff. And I think that could be because, well, who knows, maybe because they sing in a chorus somewhere and they only see treble staff there. I don't know. But I want to start with that so we can demystify reading in the bass. But the thing is that because I want to use the clef signs to help them create landmark notes, I think that the bass clef more clearly marks the F line than the treble staff marks the G line. With the bass staff, you've got the big dot and then you've got the two little dots, and they all really show that where that F line is. But I think the curl in the G line is not quite as distinct. So that's my reason for wanting to start really with the bass staff. Okay, on page 28, we put the two staffs together to create the grand staff. So we are just going to focus on F, C, and G, okay? And we still have our bold F and G lines, okay? On page 30, going the steps between those. Now, for the next several pages, the tunes will only start on a landmark note. Each melody will start, each phrase will start either on a C, a G, or an F. So they get used to seeing their landmark and then thinking, do I step up or do I step down? Okay, that's what we're focusing on. And you'll see that the notes only go in one direction, right? We go from C all the way to G, G all the way back down to C, C all the way down to F, all the way up to C. Okay, so big lines up and down. And the same thing happens on 31 in the horseback riding. Now, when we go on to page 32, we still start on a landmark note, C, F, or G, but now there's a turnaround, right? The phrase goes up and down. Then from F, and then from G, stepping down and stepping up. Okay, so they're learning to read the notes turning around, but still starting on a landmark. In Obedient School on page 33, we add another reading skill. They start up, goes back down, but then it continues up. Okay, so they've got 2 turns within the melody. Okay, so we are adding one element of reading at a time, right? We started with just straight up or down, then a 1 turn, and now 2 turns. Okay, so a little bit at a time, but still starting only from landmarks F, C, or G. All right, page 34. Now we're going to look at skips, but we're also going to learn that skips are called thirds. Okay, and we're just going to start with line note thirds in each hand. And by doing that, we can still just start on landmarks, okay? F, C, or G, all right? Then on page 35, now we're gonna have space note thirds. And for the first time, the music will not start, or phrases will not start on landmark notes, okay? But they don't start very far away. In the right hand, we just start a step above the C on D. And you'll see that there's an empty box there, okay, for them to write in that starting, the name of that starting note. And the left hand just starts a step below that landmark C. So we write that B in there, okay? So we really focus here on fingers 2 and 4, right? In the previous one, we focused on fingers 1, 3, and 5. In skateboards, we're focusing on fingers 2 and 4. And that those are the fingers that we play thirds, right? You know, the thing about reading intervals, and I want to say this right now because I think this is so important. There's always a lot of discussion about, you know, do you teach kids to name all the notes, you know, on the staff, or do you teach them to read intervals, which is more important, which should you emphasize? Well, it's both. It really isn't an either or. But I think the point that gets missed about intervals is it isn't just about recognizing them on the staff, you know, that a student can say, oh, that's a third, or oh, that's a fourth, etc. The real magic about teaching intervals is that when a student recognizes an interval on the staff, they know what it feels like in their hand. When they see a third, they know, oh, it's 1 and 3, skips fingers, or 2 and 4, or 3 and 5. Or later on, we learn about fourths. Oh, that's 1 and 4, or it's 2 and 5, right? So that when they see it on the page, there's a physical response to it. They know what it feels like. That's the real magic about reading intervals and what makes students good readers. Okay, on page 36, ice cream truck, we're going to combine line thirds and space thirds. So they've got line thirds in the first 2 bars, and the bar 3 has space thirds, and then the same idea on the second line. So again, we pull it apart. We just look at line thirds, then we just look at space thirds. Now we put line and space thirds together. Then finally, rowing on the lake on page 37, we're going to read thirds on lines and spaces, and we're going to read seconds. Okay, so now we're putting it all together. We spent a lot of time just on seconds, then we looked at thirds, line thirds, spacers, put those together. Now we put it all together here. Okay, so gradually piecing together one step at a time about how to read. Okay, page 38. So we're going to introduce eighth notes here. So I know, you know, a lot of methods really delay introducing eighth notes because sometimes that seems really hard. But I promise you, if you will teach kids to count quarter, 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 you will have no problem teaching 2 8s, 2 8s, 2 8s, 2 8s. It really does work. Okay. But if you want to teach them to count 1 and 2 and, I'm going to show you why we chose Yankee Doodle as the first piece to teach eighth notes. Okay, so what I'd like for you to do at home, whether you're at your piano or you're sitting on the sofa with a cup of coffee, whatever you're doing to be comfortable, I want you to at least mime playing along with me Yankee Doodle, and make sure you use the right finger numbers and that you count aloud with me. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. And did you notice anything? Do we need to do it again to make sure? Let's do it one more time. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and. So you see what I'm saying? The finger numbers match the counts. All right, so that's why we started with this one. It just makes it a little bit easier the first time you want them to count 1 and 2 and, because it's going to match the counts with the counts match the finger numbers. Okay. All right. Page 39, baking the cake. Now we're going to move that left hand down to our C position. Okay. So in the beginning of playing on the white keys, in the pre-staff, we started in middle C position, and then we read pre-staff in C position. We do the same thing on the staff. We started reading in middle C position, and now we'll read in C position. Okay, so they are familiar with these positions, but they're going to go through the same process, learning how to read those positions on the staff. So the main thing that has to happen here really is that all they have to do is learn to read 3 new notes, just the C, D, E in the bass staff. We bring back our bolded F line, right? Because they've been using F to read up from F up to C, but now they're going to read notes below the F line. So we need to learn that C, D, and E. And the other thing to really reinforce is that in the middle C position, 5 played F, but in this position, 2 plays F. That's the change. Okay, so that's what we want to work on. There's so much in this piece of art. I love this one. There's that painting she did of the barn earlier on. There's a cat laying there basking in the sun. And they're baking a cake, and that's going to be for their mother's surprise party that's going to come in a few pages. It's just, there's so much going on there. I just love it. Okay, page 40. Okay, so they're putting icing on this cake now. And this is the piece where we teach about slur. Smooth the icing flat and slick. Look both ways and steal a lick. I mean, those words are so vivid about what it's like to put the icing on the cake. And if you know me at all from Facebook, you know I make a lot of cakes. But anyway, spreading that icing on the cake, and the idea of slurs, you know, to make a smooth legato. Okay, so that's how we use the art and the lyrics to reinforce a musical concept. You know, we don't spell it out in the words, you're playing a slur, right? But the images that are created by with the words and the art, it reinforces the sounds that we want to make and the way that we want to play. So when we have a slur, besides playing legato, of course, the other thing a slur indicates is a phrase, right? And we want to talk to students about shaping a phrase to make the music sound more musical, right? And that's another thing that the lyrics are good for, of course, because we want students to sing and to breathe and to make the melodies played in a musical way that's really shaped. And our basic rule of thumb is that as notes go higher, we get a little louder. And as we come down, they get a little softer. And the last note of a slur is usually the softest, okay? And at the end of the slur, we want to lift our hand a little bit before we continue on to the next one. And then down, softest to here. Are they going to get that right the first time? No, you've got to start early on to make it a natural, automatic habit to shape a melody. Usually that lift, right, between slurs is really tricky to teach. Well, you'll notice we've kind of built it in here, so they can't really do it wrong, because this first phrase ends on an E, and the next one starts on an E. So they actually have to lift, right? The lift is built into the music so they can get that sound of that separation between the two notes. That's what we're going for. All right, on the next page, we learned about tie. That's another example of paired concepts, right? Slur and tie, obviously, make an excellent pairing. Okay, let's see, page 42. And as usual, I'm going to run out of time if I don't speed up here. But page 42, we learn about loud and soft. The sign F for loud and the sign P. And this is another great example of how we use the lyrics to create the sound we want in the music. So for loud, on the first line, it says sirens blare, fire trucks zoom, quick pull over, make some room. Out of sight, couldn't stay, now their sirens far away. And if your student doesn't play quite softly enough on the second line, instead of just saying play softer there, you can say something like, I think your fire truck needs to be further away. You know, make it vivid so that they really work to create the sound, you know, from this image, right? Same thing on page 43 with the surprise party. Remember that cake they were baking? Now we have the surprise party for their mom, right? And the first line we have Stay hidden, stay quiet. We don't dare let out a peep. Shout loudly, cheer wildly. No more secrets now to keep. So there's a motivation behind the dynamics, playing softly when you're waiting to have the surprise, and then loudly for the surprise. Okay. So that's what I mean by we constantly use the art and lyrics to reinforce a musical concept that's being presented. On page 44, running errands, we teach about fourth. And again, we really want to build the sensation of a fourth into the hand, that it's 1 and 4 or 2 and 5. Okay, so the pieces are very tactile. They really reinforce the sensation, the feeling of these intervals. On page 40, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. I actually want to go ahead to page 52. I'm going to go way ahead to page 52, because this is the same idea that we want a physical response to something they see on the page. So when we teach sharp, and we do the same thing later on when we teach flat, we want them to have a physical sensation in mind when they see a sharp sign, that they have to move up to the nearest key. So 2 is on D, and then 2 moves up to D sharp. So they actually have to relocate that finger from the white key up to the black key. And the left hand does the same thing, moving from F up to the F sharp. Okay, so that sharp means you got to move up, and they actually have to make that change. Okay. On page 54, we go to the G position. So now we move out, and they're really getting experience reading on a nice wide range. All of Pianotown is a gradual multi-key method. They will read and play in all keys by the time they get through the method. And I really am a big believer in multi-key teaching for many reasons, from a technical standpoint, from a reading standpoint, just getting a theoretical standpoint, all of it. I really think it works well. But one of the things that really is great for helping reinforce strong reading, especially interval reading, is transposition. And in the level 1 book, which we're not looking at today, I just want to mention the level 1 book, they learn the key signatures for F and G as well as C. And halfway through the book, they start transposing. And if you really want to reinforce good interval reading, do a lot of transposition with your students, because once they play in a different key than the music is written, they have to think by interval. That's the only way, to get the right notes. So that is just so important. On page 58, moving, it's the same idea here, learning about playing flats. The third finger starts on the white key, then it moves down to the black key, and then back up to the white key. So that flat means you've got to do something. You need to move somewhere else. And then finally, the last piece in the book on pages 60 and 61, graduation day. In the artwork there, every character that's appeared through the book is there at the graduation. So that's kind of fun. This piece is way easier. It just sounds big and dramatic, so they can just have a lot of fun playing their big final piece. But the new thing here is they get to use pedal at the end of the piece, and they're going to cross their left hand over the right hand to play the final note. Now, if it's a 6-year-old who can't quite reach the pedals, you can reach your leg over and put the pedal down for them. Somebody at home can do that. A brother or a sister or a parent can put the pedal down for them. Make it kind of fun that way, but they do get to do that. All right, then on the last 2 pages here, 62 and 63. So this is essentially a glossary of everything that they learn throughout the book. But the way to use this, right from the start of the book, every time a student learns a new concept, you come back here and you can put a check mark in the box, or you can put a sticker there, or you can use a color highlighter, anything you want. But these will fill up then as they go through the book and they learn each concept. You come to the back of the book here and check it off. And that's kind of motivating. I think getting to turn to the back of the book and putting a sticker or whatever is great. And then finally, of course, when they get to all the way to that last piece, and they get their certificate here with the official Pianotown seal that promotes them on to level 1, which quickly I want to mention. I already mentioned about transposition in level 1, which I think is important. The other thing to know about level 1 is that the first several pages are a review of the primer, right? So when a student finishes that and they start here, they're going to start with a review. But the review is designed in such a way that if you have an older beginner, maybe an 11-year-old, 12-year-old on up, you can actually just start with this book. For any student who the primer feels too young, right? You can actually just start here the way that the front of this book is designed. Okay, so that's what I wanted to mention about level 1. Okay, that gets us, basically through that book and an introduction to it. As Carly mentioned, we do have the teacher's guide is available at the Kjos website. And in the teacher's guide, literally every page is discussed. So many of the things I said today will be in that teacher's guide, and some of the pages I skipped, you can still go back and reference that. Or if you've forgotten anything I've said today, you can go back and look at that teacher's guide, and that will reference that for you. But if we have some questions, I'd be happy to go ahead now and have a discussion about any comments or questions that you might have.
All right. Thank you so much for this presentation, Keith. It's been absolutely wonderful as always. Thank you everybody for being with us. I know some of you have to run to lessons, but if you can stay for the Q&A, that would be wonderful. I'm going to put our discount information into the chat for you. Again, this code can be used directly on our website in your cart to receive 40% off the Pianotown books. And then there is also a link to the books directly on our website as well, and our contact. We do have a few questions already, so I'm just going to dive right into that. The first one was, what repertoire or type/level of material do you recommend for a next step once a student finishes level 4 of the Pianotown books?
So the place to go after level 4, and this will sound really confusing, but this is just how it works out. If you go into level 3 of the piano repertoire or essential piano repertoire, okay? That's where you go from level 4. I hope that helps.
Perfect. I'm sure that does. The next question was specifically in Pianotown. What do you do with the student on page 29?
I did skip that page. That was one of the pages I slid past. Okay, so the idea of this page, we've just been showing the F, C, and G, and we've been focusing on that. But it's just to give the student the idea of how it works, that there is a note on the staff for every key on the piano. You don't have to learn that right now, but sometimes it's just a little easier, a little calming for students to know there is a finite amount of information that they're going to have to learn. This is it, okay? And that's just how it works, that there is a note on the staff for every key, okay? And then here, we're really just looking at going up and down and line notes and space notes. Just, do you see the difference? They circle line notes when they circle space notes. We just want to see, do you see the difference between line notes and space notes? We're reinforcing that, and then direction up and down. So it's just a little reinforcement page. Doesn't have to take very long, but just a bit of reinforcement there.
Perfect. Another question that was in the chat a while ago was, how do you keep a student's interest while going through the pieces for the fingering exercises and finger development when they want to be playing songs that they already know?
Well, that's a very interesting thought. So I think you have to have a balance of both. One thing I forgot to point out were the practice instructions. And in the beginning, we say, play and say the finger numbers, play and count the rhythm, and play and sing the words, okay? And there's a reason for that. When they play and say the finger numbers, they're looking specifically at finger numbers. That's the only thing that they're doing. Then when they play and count the rhythm, quarter, 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 half note, they have to look at the finger numbers and the rhythm. So now they take in 2 things, right? Mm-hmm. Then when they sing the lyrics, now they've got to take in 3 things. They've got to sing the words, read the finger numbers, and notice the rhythm, okay? Mm-hmm. So by constantly expanding what they have to look at. This is how we develop their rhythm. So we want to do all three of those practice steps. And I do all three of those practice steps in the lesson. Okay. If you want them to do something at home, you've got to do it in the lesson. As I mentioned, that's why we have the kind of lyrics and art that we have, is to help keep their interest. And it does, it draws them in because it makes it more memorable. And if you get the technique and the performance books, you'll see that whatever piece they are doing in the lesson book, whatever the title and the art is about, will be supported by a similar title and art in the other books. And it creates a bit of a unit, and that helps keep them engaged, and they kind of remember what's going on more. It's a more interesting than saying unit 1 and unit 2, et cetera, et cetera. If they want to play tunes they know, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, you know, we play the piano because it's fun to be able to play tunes that we know on the piano. So I wouldn't say they can't do that, as long as they do the other stuff too, right? And kind of reward them with one thing. If you want to play that, you've got to do this too.
Yeah, you got to do the exercises to do the pieces.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Another one, how do you reinforce hand position?
Okay, so that's always a hard one. So one of the things that I really like to do is to help them get the shape of the hand. Okay. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I start with is I will have them lay their hand on a table or maybe just here. And I want to have 3 points on the same plane. The fingertips, the wrist, and the elbow are on a plane together. And what we want to build is the bridge of the hand. That's the highest part. Okay, that's what we're going for. And that the fingers are curved. They're not curled, they're not long, but they're just curved. Okay, curved gently. Okay, so we want to get this feeling of this being up a little bit. And one way to do that is make a fist with the other hand and lay that one on top. Actually, it works better, I think, that way. Either way, though, you know, or you can do it on the knee. I don't think I can quite show that. But you want to get that feeling. Now, I'll tell you what my mother would always say to her students, and somehow, maybe because I'm a guy, I feel more self-conscious about this, but she would always say, you're making a little bird cage and you've got to have a little birdie just right under your hand. And you want to make sure you don't squash the birdie. So that's why you have to keep that up so you don't squash the bird. Okay. And you want to have that little bit of space there because the birdie needs to see out. Okay. So that was what my mom always said, but somehow I've never quite incorporated that. But the other thing is, you also want to make sure that there's space here, because one of the other things that happens so often is this gets closed up, right? Mm-hmm. And we want to make sure that there is, that makes a letter C. Okay, think of it that way. You got to make a letter C right here. Okay, so that's another hand position thing. So what I do is as they're playing, I mentioned earlier, I like to go really slowly. That's why I like to count by naming the note values, because they go slower, right? And as they're playing, I am constantly tweaking little adjustments with their hand position. Okay, mm-hmm. So I don't just let them play and let it fall apart and then go back and correct it. I will make adjustments as we go. Now, later on too, when we're playing chords or something like that, if they play a chord and the hand position really falls apart, I have them clean it up while they're still holding the chord. So they get used to going, oh, that's not so good. Oh, that's how it should be. Okay. So keep cleaning it up, keep reminding, gentle, constant, persistent reminders about hand position. So much of it too is they have to understand what it feels like and what it looks like. You know, mm-hmm. So you want them in the technique book, the exercises can be memorized right away so that they actually look at what their hands are doing, you know, because a lot of times they don't know what it feels like to do it correctly, and it feels fine to them, right? So you need to find out, they need to find out what it feels like and what it looks like. So with those exercises, you want to get them actually eyes on their hand as well. I'll stop about that, or I'll go on for 5 more.
No, it's great. Can you give a little more detail into what is in the technique book?
Well, as I said, so the exercises can be memorized very quickly, so that they're not really reading exercises. They really are technique exercises. They can look at their hands and focus on that. And a lot of them move them around the keyboard, right? So they'll have a pattern. Maybe it'll just be something like this, and they move it up. and they'll keep going. So it's going to move them all over the place, or it'll change octaves or something like that. So that's where they're going to get more freedom about moving around the keyboard as well. Because like I say, they're not reading exercises. They're really for technique, and they can be learned quite quickly.
Perfect. How many pieces or pages do you assign for 1 week of practice with a student?
So, of course, it varies from student to student. There's no one size fits all. I would say, but most typically, I would do 2 pages out of the lesson book with the corresponding technique and theory. And then the following week, I would supplement with the performance book piece that goes with them.
Okay.
Now, I do want to say one more thing about the performance book. With some students, I delay that book until they've completed the lesson technique and theory. And then we use the performance book as a giant review book, So maybe they've gone through those other 3 books, and maybe now it's summertime, you're not going to see them as often. The summer assignment book can be the performance book. That can be a really nice way to do it. That just depends on how much the student practices, how quick they are, if they feel overwhelmed by that much material. With some students, it's fine to do all of them, but I usually do stagger them. I'll do the 2 pages in the lesson with the corresponding theory and technique, and then the next week introduce the performance piece.
That makes sense. A little variety is good. Another question in the Q&A, does the performance book correspond directly with the lesson book at each level?
Absolutely. Yes. And it will say at the bottom of the page, which page it corresponds with. Yes, it's all coordinated together.
Perfect. All right. Another one. Why is transposition introduced in level 1 and not in the primer or in a later level? Is there a pedagogical reason behind that?
Yes, there is. And I will admit that sometimes personally, I do introduce transposition even in the primer level. I do get a jump on that early on. So we really only introduce the C position and the G position in the primer level. We introduce a lot in this primer level. And so that to go further than that seemed maybe like just too much, In the level 1, we actually introduce key signatures, the key of G, and what a key is, key of G, key of C, key of F. So it makes a little more sense. And we just transpose within those 3 keys in the level 1 book. But I have a book that called A Beginning Multi-Key Reading, because as I mentioned, I'm a multi-key teacher. And usually by the time we're in level 1 of Piano Town, I've already taught them to play all 12 positions, okay? Because I like to teach that early on. Every teacher doesn't like to do that, so we didn't put that, in there. The method itself is more gradual, multi-key. So I will have them transposing to more keys than just C, G, and F. But pedagogically, I think just because we only did C and G positions in the primer, you can introduce transposing if you want there, but we delayed it to the point where they actually had learned key signatures for those keys. So that was why.
Great. One more. How do you keep 5- and 6-year-olds' attention? Do you have any tips?
Oh, it's exhausting. I'll tell you that. It can be really exhausting. And I don't teach 5-year-olds very often. I usually wait till they're 6 or 7 to start. I know a lot of teachers will teach younger than that. My mom certainly did. I know Jane certainly did. Maybe you have to be a mom or a grandma to teach 4- and 5-year-olds. I don't know. But I tend to wait until they're 6 or 7 to start. So, I think the thing is you have to not, if you find that their attention isn't holding, you have to keep switching gears. You have to keep doing different things. And maybe you need to get off the piano bench and go do something, maybe march around the room or something like that. You have to keep engaging them with different things. So maybe you've got to quickly switch to a different book, or switch to an interval game, or switch to some flashcards. I'll tell you, stickers are a big motivation. You know, if you'll stay here and play this through with all 3 practice steps one time for me, I'll give you several stickers, that kind of thing. There's a fabulous product, and it really works. I hate to say it, but it's called Music Money, and Kjos sells it. It's made by the 3 Cranky Women. I've never had a product work as well as Music Money.
Yeah.
I mean, they will do anything for Music Money. So that is a really big one to engage them as well.
We love a little prize. That always works.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? Money works for me too.
Yeah. Small bribes work.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think also with the Piano Tone books, the imagery, I'm sure, helps a lot with that too. The artwork.
It does. It keeps them engaged. It really, really does. You know, if you've got a dinosaur piece, and then your technique pieces about dinosaurs and your performance pieces about dinosaurs, they, you know, it keeps them sort of engaged and connected with what's going on. It's more memorable. It's more memorable for them. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is all the questions that we had.
So I'm seeing something here. They want to know if I have one question here. I just noticed.
Oh,
do you have a music dictionary for levels 3 through 6? So when you say 3 through 6, I'm kind of assuming you mean for the piano repertoire series, because of course there's no level 5 and 6 for Piano Town. There is music dictionary in the theory books, in the fundamentals of piano theory. There's music dictionary. Okay. And there is music dictionary for Piano Town in the theory books. At the back of each theory book, there's a music dictionary. So that's where those are, in the theory books. Okay. Just thought I'd mention, I just saw that.
Yeah,
there,
thank you. I lost that one in the chat. Again, if it's in the chat, I'm trying my best to follow.
I know. There's a lot of stuff in the chat, isn't there? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, there's a lot. Thank you all so much for your investing time and energy into this event. It's been so wonderful having you, and your questions have been absolutely great. It's been wonderful to have you. And thank you, Keith, for everything you have put into the presentation.
My pleasure.
Absolutely wonderful having you as always. I'm going to put the information for our discount one more time into the chat for you, along with a link to Piano Town on our website. And if anyone else would like to reach out to us or has a question, please feel free to send an email to email@kjos.com, and we will pass that along to Keith, or if we can answer it, we will facilitate that for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you all so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time. It's great.
And we hope you have an absolutely lovely week.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.